Hello, I'm Lorena Nava-Ruggiero, and you're watching SDSU Live, a live video program of San Diego State University. Today, I'm speaking with Pulitzer Prize winner Ed Larson. Larson has written a number of books on science and evolution and is speaking later today as part of the university's year-long celebration of Darwin's 200th birthday. Ed, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Beautiful day here in San Diego.
It is, it is. So in terms of your lecture later today, what are you going to be talking about?
Well, I'm going to sort of deal with one aspect. There are lots of issues that come up with the history of evolution and the debates over evolution. But one of the debates that has stayed with us is what evolution tells us about human nature, the human soul. That was right when Darwin came out. The objections were not so much to the fact of evolution. People pretty quickly accepted, oh, the human body can evolve, animals evolve, plants evolve. But there was this reluctance, there's something special about humans. The human soul, or altruistic behavior, or human higher consciousness. You could focus it in different ways. And maybe that's what's different. That couldn't have evolved. That must have come. Well, Darwin's the co-discoverer of natural selection, Alfred Russel Wallace. Even though he was well, you'd say a Darwinist, we could say a Wallaceite, from the very beginning, and very strong believer in natural selection as the source of evolutionary change, he still maintained that the higher human consciousness, the great mind that humans have, must have been created by a yet higher intelligence and imposed in an advanced form of an ape or evolved ape. Now, this was the position that many Catholics came to early. A lot of early Catholic scientists from the late 1800s thought about this, began thinking about this way, and this is what the Catholic Church, too, gradually gravitated toward. So this has been an ongoing debate, and now with the recent developments in neurobiology, but also the ongoing debates over sociobiology and evolutionary psychology, this debate, which was alive then, continues on today. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the history, focusing on the earlier periods as sort of background to what's coming up today.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned intelligent design. It seems that folks use that kind of as a compromise between creationism versus evolution. Do you think there's any validity to that? Why or why not? And why does it continue to be, the answer for so many people?
Well, I think personally, from my work in the area, there's a lot of confusion over what intelligent design means. But there used to be this same sort of confusion, I think there still is, over what creationism means. Let's go back to the root of the terms. You can just mean by saying, I'm a creationist, is that God somehow created everything. And therefore, this creation could be creating the laws of evolutionary development that then produced all this. And isn't it so wonderful to have a God who can work by wholesale rather than one that has to work by retail, designing every individual kind? And there's a long tradition going back 150 years, ever since the time Darwin came out. In fact, Darwin kicked that off. When you look at Origin of Species, the last line, the very last line says, isn't this amazing? Isn't this miraculous that from a few beings, life was breathed into a few beings and everything else evolved? Well, that right there in Darwin, right there in Origin of Species, 150 years ago, suggests an intelligent designer at the very beginning. So is that what you mean by creationism? Or do you mean by creationism the ideas of Henry Morris and the Institute of Creation Research that God specifically created in a very biblical way in 6 literal days within the last 10,000 years, each kind of animal and all the land animals on the 6th day, because that's what the Bible describes? Well, what do you mean by creationism? And the same debate happens with intelligent design. Do you mean the anthropic principle? Do you mean that behind everything, everything looks out there in the universe just looks too orderly to be totally random? Is there an intelligent designer behind the laws of physics that then kick out the evolutionary development? Or are we talking about what the capital I, capital D, modern intelligent design movement means? And then you have to look at these people who are the proponents of this, and it's usually capitalized, intelligent design, what they're talking about. And there we're talking about typically God coming in and specifically designing things through history. Not the laws initially, not the anthropic principle that there are orderly laws, but rather God intervening. Many intelligent people, proponents of intelligent design, while they generally accept a long Earth history, though not all do, that is, that the Earth is very old, that God created each basic kind. That seems to be the dominant view within intelligent design. So people, I think, when they hear these terms, many people, most Americans, 90% of Americans think that God is behind the process, that there was an intelligent designer behind the process. And so when they heard terms like, well, sure, I'm a creationist in that sense, and, oh, intelligent design, it just means there's an intelligent designer behind the laws of physics that leads to evolution. Or do they mean creation science or intelligent design in the sense that God basically created the different kinds either over a long Earth history or short Earth history. So in that sense, intelligent design is not really, if it's with the doctrinal term, the intelligent designers based out of the Discovery Institute, it's really not a compromised position. But if you're talking about design in nature, that many people believe that's true. In fact, many leaders in the leading evolutionists, Francis Collins, the head of the Human Genome Project, Ken Miller, who writes by far the most popular high school biology textbook, and is a very prominent evolutionary biologist at Brown. He believes in the anthropic principle that there's design, that there's a God behind the process, just not in intelligent design. So that's where I think people get confused over what the term means. And when you divide it out, it can either be a sense of, sure, theistic evolution and God behind it is a compromised position, but not the intelligent design.
So with the introduction of intelligent design, we're seeing it in the school system. Do you think that lessens the science education in the U.S.? I mean, there continues to be this debate about evolution, despite the fact that it's been around for, at least with Darwin's On the Origin of Species, for 150 years. I mean, is it to our children's detriment that we're teaching intelligent design?
Well, I don't think we are actually teaching intelligent design very much. So far, whenever there's been an attempt to introduce intelligent design concepts, such as in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago, it's been beaten back by the courts. It was defeated there where they tried to work in Pandas and People, which was purported to be an intelligent design text, though the court found it was more creation science. It was defeated by the courts. And so I don't think there's certainly individual science teachers who may be teaching elements of this, but it's not part of the state curriculum. There's debates in Texas, there's debates in Ohio, there's debates in Louisiana about this. But so far, the courts have all come out saying intelligent design, and again, we're talking now, capital I, capital D, this doctrinal concept, not the idea of an order behind nature, that's been ruled unconstitutional because you're teaching a religious doctrine as science, and that the courts have said you can't do. Now, that said, I do think that a good science teacher can use creation science, intelligent design, whatever, as long as their pedagogical principle, their goal, what they're trying to do is teach people to understand how science works. You can take things like intelligent design, which is really more a philosophical position than it is an articulated body of science. In fact, even its lead proponent, Philip Johnson, in a recent interview, admitted that there isn't any body of evidence, of scientific evidence for intelligent design. It's not a science yet. But it is a philosophical position that God is continuously involved in nature. Well, you could use that to help people in a classroom, to help people understand the difference between religion and science. That is, that the goal of science is to give naturalistic explanation for physical phenomena. Now, there may be other explanations for physical phenomena, but the goal of science is to give the naturalistic ones. And then you can see how science is fundamentally different than intelligent design. Now, you could use that in the classroom because many students are, from their home and from their church and from other activities, are very familiar with the ideas of intelligent design or with creation science and are familiar with the alternatives. Well, the way to get students interested in class is rather than just blindly teach some facts, create some tension, create some difference, create some explanations. You can see what science is by seeing how it differs from other ways of thought. So I think you could use intelligent design, depending on what your goals are. If your goals are to proselytize for a religious idea, the Supreme Court says you can't do that. But if your goals are to teach good science, I could see how you could bring in other ideas. Just like the best way to learn about American culture is to learn about global culture. The best way to learn about capitalism is to learn about other economic systems, the mixed economic systems. And that can work also in science.
So using it kind of as part of the spectrum of things you might teach in a classroom then.
Well, and with a clear understanding that the goal is to teach science. And what science is naturalistic answers for physical phenomena. That doesn't mean it's the only answer. I mean, to take, for example, to make a leap, to take, for example, medical school. Now, many people believe, many Americans believe when they get sick, or when their grandmother gets sick, or when their wife gets sick, or their children get sick, they pray. And they believe that the prayer has some effect. But that doesn't mean you want it taught in medical school. You still often go to a doctor. Now, some don't. Christian Scientists don't. But you still go to a doctor. And you want allopathic medicine for treatments. But you also go to spiritual healing. You use herbs and cures. You use prayer. And which ultimately cures your child or your grandparents? Was it the prayer, or was it the chemotherapy? Or which fails to do it, which works. So we can hold different ideas. Now, then, to understand how allopathic medicine works, you can explain how faith healing works. But that doesn't mean you're teaching faith healing as a scientific alternative, because it's not a scientific alternative, it's a religious alternative. And I think that's what I'm talking about, that you can take intelligent design and you could say how this is a philosophy, it's a way of thinking things. It may even be true. But that's not what the debate is. The debate is, what's science? And how does this differ from science? So I think in that way, it's not really it's not a range of alternatives. It's a different way of approaching an issue. And if we understand these things, that can be a benefit in understanding science, but also in understanding people, and understanding religion, and understanding society. And that's really the goal of education. So I think that, teaching today is an enormous challenge, and it's only getting tougher with kids moving around because their homes are being foreclosed and budgets being cut, and anything that can make education work better to foster critical thought, to foster people thinking, and working through curriculum. We've got to try everything, because our schools it's a tremendous challenge, and there's no one more important in American society, in my opinion, than K through 12 teachers. We need them.
Definitely. Well, you have such a passion for science, and you've written so many books on science and on evolution in particular. Why do these topics continue to hold your interest? Was it a K through 12 teacher?
I've always been fascinated by history, and I've always been fascinated by science. And in so many ways, it's interesting to me to see the importance that modern society places on science, the authority that science has. It's not totally uniform. It's somewhat limited, and yet more than any time in our history, more than any time in world history, we look to scientists for answers. Now, we also question them, we also challenge them, and so I've been interested in that cutting edge between what is the authority of science, what is the place for science, where do we get our values, what do we decide what is true, what is important. At a time in world history, religion was the source of authority. It still is for many people, but science is a competing source of authority. They battle in the United States for authority. In other countries, religion is far stronger than science, such as in Latin America, for example. In other places, such as in Western Europe, science is far stronger than religion, and religion has very little authority. Those are the sorts of questions in sort of mundane, boring intellectual history that I've always been fascinated with. And I have worked in areas of physics, and I've worked in other areas of history of science, but there's nothing that plays it out more in the last 150 years than evolution. And so that's why I've focused more on that topic, playing out its cultural, social, scientific importance, those questions of authority, epistemology, they interest me. And religion, more than the Big Bang Theory, or more than plate tectonics, or more than quantum mechanics, all those interest me. But it's played out more in the biological sciences, and it's probably played out more first because the sciences are more understandable to people than physics, which is just so far beyond that people just roll their eyes and they don't know what relativity or quantum mechanics are. They can sort of get their hands around evolution, but also it involves people. And we're pretty anthropocentric. We pretty much care more about ourselves than anybody else, and more than about the stars or whatever. So we care about ourselves, and biology, and evolutionary sociobiology, evolutionary psychology, they try to help explain who we are. Well, so does religion. And so you get the tensions there more. And so I get drawn to that topic, writing different books that deal with different aspects of that issue. And so I don't think I'm writing the same book at all. All the time, I'm writing very different books. One on eugenics, say, for example, one on science in the Galapagos Islands, another one on sort of a broad history of the theory of evolution, one just narrowly on the Scopes trial. You work them all together. They're different angles of looking at the same, I would say different facets of the same diamond for me. It's something that interests me.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Professor Larson. If you'd like to hear more about this tension between religion and evolution and everything else that Ed will have to say later today, be sure to attend his lecture at 4:30 p.m. today in Montezuma Hall on the SDSU campus. The event is free and open to the public. And thank you for joining us at SDSU Live. We hope you tune in again. And thank you, Ed, so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
This is our community.
We work together, play together, and serve the community together.
We fuel the region's economy.
We're pride and spirit.
Exploration and achievement, the foundation and the future of San Diego.
More than 200,000 strong.
But it's not just who we are. It's what we do for the place we call home.
This is your time.
Aztec for life.
Make the connection.